Yeah, I just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so I'm in a Final Fantasy mood. Let's talk Final Fantasy. Hey everyone, welcome to the ranking. Welcome to a ranking video that I hope most people are going to watch, because I know when I talk Final Fantasy and some video game related stuff, not as interesting. A lot of people like for me to talk about the movie stuff, and I love doing that, but I want to talk about a little bit about Final Fantasy, because just finished Rebirth. I could do a whole video on Rebirth, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if people want to hear that, so I'll just say, fuck it, I'm going to just rank all the Final Fantasy games I've played. Because why the fuck not? I have played 20 Final Fantasy games. I guess I'm not like a diehard Final Fantasy, even though I love Final Fantasy with all my heart. It's my favorite gaming franchise, but I haven't played all of them. So I guess that doesn't make me the biggest diehard Final Fantasy fan, but I've played pretty much all 1 through 16 except 11. I was not on the 11 train when that happened. And I've played some of the side stuff, but not all of it. There's just a lot out there, and just some of it just did not seem interesting. So let's get to it. Here is the 20 Final Fantasy games I've played, and me ranking them from my least favorite to my favorite. And please don't hate me. It's just my opinion. All right, number 20, the most divisive Final Fantasy of all time. 13, baby. Final Fantasy 13 is the worst Final Fantasy for me. It's just for me. Guys, I'm not a fan. I don't like it that much. I just don't think Lightning is an interesting character. It almost felt like they were trying to make a female Cloud Strife, but just not as interesting or enjoyable or just, I don't know, anything. She's just a boring character, and I hated Snow. I hated Hope. God, that little bastard didn't shut up. Vanille and Fang were probably the only ones I thought were tolerable, but I just didn't give a shit about these characters. I just didn't care, and just the world, it just was boring, and the story was painfully uninteresting, and the soundtrack sucked. The visuals were really good for its time, but the crystal grids, I still to this day don't understand the crystal grid system. I just don't. I think they were trying to be like Final Fantasy X with the sphere grid. Sphere grids were a lot more self-explanatory, but the crystal grids is just, ugh. The way they do customizations, the way they did the weapons and items and all that, so confusing. I did not have fun. And I never played the side like 13-2 or anything. I just didn't care. It just, after playing it and beating it, I just didn't want anything to do with Final Fantasy 13 again. So, to me, it's the worst. To me. Number 19 is Final Fantasy 2. Final Fantasy 2 is basically the same as Final Fantasy 1. It brings just the four basic characters, the soldier, the mage. There's not much of a story. It's just a very basic fantasy world. It's pretty much just Final Fantasy 1, just with different worlds and different bosses, and just, I don't know, just, I don't like the music either. Just, unpopular opinion, I'm not a big fan of the old school Final Fantasies. And I'm not talking about like the big ones, but like the very beginning of Final Fantasy. I'm just not a fan. I just don't think they hold up very well, and 2 is definitely the one that holds up the least. And now we're getting to number 18, which is the first Final Fantasy, which I also don't think holds up very strong. I played all the classic Final Fantasy. I got the whole collection of 1 through 6 and played through all of them. Man, 1 and 2 and 3 were so painfully like boring to play through. They're just very basic fantasy games. And like, yeah, you got like Sid, who's in all of them, but like it's just 4 characters that are nameless, and they just all have like, one's black magic, white magic, soldier, magician, all that. Like, it's just a simple story of beating the bad guy, going on a journey, leveling up, and beating the bad guy, saving the kingdom. It's just a very basic, stale fantasy story. And I get it was revolutionary when it came out, but when you play it now, it just doesn't hold up very well. And now we're getting to number 17, which is Final Fantasy 3. The reason I have Final Fantasy 3 over 1 and 2, just Final Fantasy 3 at least brings in characters with names, even though they're very forgettable and I could barely remember their names because I played this game like 6 months ago and I still, for the life of me, can't remember any of these characters' names and what the fuck happened. I remember more of the worlds, and just the battle system was a lot more engaging, and just it was a lot more entertaining and more of an engaging play than the first two, and just yeah, the first two were just a grind for me to get through, but at least 3 was a little more enjoyable. All right, number 16, 10-2. 10-2 for the longest time actually was like was like my least favorite. It's because 10 is one of my all-time favorite Final Fantasies, and it has a perfect ending, and I don't ever think it needed a sequel. And I think the sequel just jeopardizes what 10 did. And I guess as I've gotten older and I've played it recently, I can see why people like 10-2. I don't hate it as much as I did when it came out. When 10-2 came out for the PS2, I hated that game. I fucking couldn't. It was like my least favorite Final Fantasy game. I thought it was so bad. I hated what they did with the story. 10 was just such a perfect game for me. And I just didn't like what 10-2 was all about. I didn't even like the gameplay. I didn't like the three of them, Riku, Yuna, and Pain, and the different styles, the dancing, and I thought it was so like early 2000s. It was so cringy and just I don't know what they were doing with this game. And however, there is some good stuff in it. There is some funny moments, and I will say if you get the happy ending, the 100% ending, and Titus coming back with you, that it is very touching and it's very heartfelt, and there is some nice moments here. I just still don't think it's a great game. Alright, number 15 is Final Fantasy V. Final Fantasy V has great villains and great dungeons, still has very basic one-note characters, but it is a lot better than the original 3. And I just remember the worlds, going into the worlds, and the airship was really cool. The bosses were a lot more interesting. It was actually a lot more challenging, because I think the first 3 Final Fantasies are so goddamn easy. They're like the easiest platinum trophies you'll get. 5 is actually a challenge, and when you find secret bosses, it's actually challenging, and it actually feels like you're playing a legit Final Fantasy game. So, give kudos to that for Final Fantasy V. Alright, number 14 is another very divisive Final Fantasy, but I'm more positive than negative on, is Final Fantasy VIII. I like Final Fantasy VIII. I actually enjoyed. Now we're into all the ones after this I enjoyed. I know I've not been positive yet, but 14 all the way to number 1 are all good Final Fantasy games. 8 is like the lowest tier of good, but still a good game. I like Zell in this game. He's such a great character. I like Squall too. Squall Lionheart. He's definitely he's not the most interesting protagonist out of Final Fantasy protagonists. And the romance between him and Renoa is not as interesting as like a Titus and Yuna romance, but it's fine. And the way they do the time travel, it was very ambitious for a Final Fantasy story and stuff. And yeah, I liked a lot of stuff in it, actually. The only stuff I was never on board was the junctions. I hated doing the junctions and how to craft magic and stuff. Never got on board with that. I also hated the card game. I usually love card games in video games. Like, I love Gwent in The Witcher 3. I love, like, Orlog in Assassin's Creed. And yeah, I like card games, but for some reason this one just wasn't that interesting for me. And I thought it was kind of shitty and boring, and I don't know. And I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh guy. I love Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff. So I'm also a Magic guy. So the fact that you made a card game this boring, and I also was not a big fan of the final boss. I'm just not a big fan of that. But I wish there was just a lot more characters I cared about. Like, I was more like, I love Zell and everything, but the rest of the characters not bad. They're just not characters I love and just characters I always talk about and remember. The only ones I always remember the most is Zell for this game, and he's great. And the game is a good game. I like it. It's just not one of my favorites, but I enjoy it. Number 13 is Final Fantasy Tactics. I think this is one of the most underrated Final Fantasy games. This was a tactical Final Fantasy game. It was all strategy. It was very like moving your spaces and almost a lot like if you know the mini game in Final Fantasy 7 when you have to play as the mini troops. It's basically a whole Final Fantasy game like that. And I loved this game. I had this game on the PS1. I always enjoyed it. I like games like this and stuff. And it's very like Pillars of Eternity almost. It was like almost like the beginning of what a Pillars of Eternity. It's almost like a Dungeons and Dragons Final Fantasy game, and I always enjoyed it. I liked how unique and ambitious it was, and I think it's one of the most underappreciated Final Fantasy games. So, thumbs up if you like Final Fantasy Tactics. Number 12 is Final Fantasy 12, another underappreciated Final Fantasy game. This is just a list of... Now we're getting to the section of underrated Final Fantasy games. 12 is super underrated, very ahead of its time, because this is the first, this is the first Final Fantasy game that wasn't turn-based. It was, free roam style, and the way they do, the lock-ons with the blue and the red and stuff, and all that was really cool. The biggest flaw with this game is the lead character. Oh my god, I forget the guy's name. I forget his name. He's probably one of the worst main characters. The whole game should have been about Balthier. Balthier, the Sky Pirate Captain, is the game. He is the best part of this game. When Balthier comes, that's when this game gets fucking great. The main guy isn't terrible, but he's just so boring and just, who gives a fuck? Go to Balthier when it gets to the Sky Pirates and it becomes like a pirate game. That's when the game gets so good. The medieval stuff and all that shit and the thievery is okay, but the pirate shit, that's when this game gets wicked. And I always enjoyed Final Fantasy 12. And again, when I was on my Final Fantasy craze 6 months ago, replayed 12. Still a banger of a game. Has its issues, but I like it. Number 11. Another underrated one. 15. Final Fantasy 15. I like Final Fantasy 15. Everyone calls it the boy band one. The boy band Final Fantasy. I don't care. I like it. I like this road trip adventure. Prince Noctis and his 3 best buddies, his bodyguards, on this journey. He's going to get married, and he's in an arranged marriage and stuff, but then his father dies. He has to find out what happened to his kingdom and stuff, and such a good story. Such a damn great story with a very emotional climax. That climax of this game is so good. The music is great, and just I love the brotherly camaraderie in this game. Just these 4 guys and just their relationships and their friendships is just the heart and soul of the game. And just, that's why I've always enjoyed Final Fantasy 15. My biggest issues is that I wish I could play more as different characters, not just Prince Noctis. And I just wish there was better customization with weapons and magic and materia and stuff. That was all, I had issues with. But the story and characters, I really enjoyed it. And I've always had fun with Final Fantasy 15. So, yeah, I like it. Number 10, Final Fantasy 4. This is the first Final Fantasy that really goes out there with its story. The stuff with Kain and Cecil is so good. This is the first Final Fantasy game with a twist. It has a very groundbreaking ending. This is when Final Fantasy gets really good with its storytelling, and I really enjoyed it. I remember I rented this game from Blockbuster when I was a kid, and I was blown away by the story. And I had to rent it a second time so I could finish the game. And I've always wanted to come back to this game when it comes to the old school classic Final Fantasies, from 1 to 6. And this is the one that just always speaks to me because it's the first one with such a unique story, and I've always loved Final Fantasy 4. And if you want to play if you've never played a Final Fantasy game and you want to start with a Final Fantasy game, but you want to start with a really older one, 4 is the best one to start with. Such a good game. Was that number 10? Number 10 was 4. Number 9 is Final Fantasy 9. Final Fantasy 9 is another solid game. This is a lot of people's favorites, actually. A lot of people's favorites. It's definitely not my favorite. I have problems with some of the bosses and stuff, but Zidane's a great character. Garnett is a great character. Vivi is the best. He's almost like the main character. He should have been the main character. Vivi is the most interesting character, probably the most tragic character too, and yeah, he's great. I like that this game also has a twist that's very good. Visually, it's fantastic. The gameplay is so good. I can tell they fixed a lot of things because from 7 to 8, people were not happy with the gameplay of 8 when they brought in the junctions and stuff. So they went back to the 7 route with Final Fantasy 9 and improved on that, and that's why 9 just looks fantastic, and the gameplay is just so beautiful and fluid, and just the gameplay is the best part because it's so fun. Just the turn base is fantastic, the materia system, the crafting, the weapons, the costumes, all of that is just top freaking notch. The worlds in Final Fantasy 9 are wicked. The bosses, the monsters you fight, all excellent. Excellent. The only issue I have with this is I don't think the last boss is all that great, and I think the story is just not as interesting as other Final Fantasy stories. It's a good story, just not a great story, but it's still a great Final Fantasy game, though. So, yeah, 9. All right, number 8. Number 8 is 16, the new-ish one. I'm not a lot of people are talking about 16, which I think is shameful because I think this is an excellent game. This was definitely one of my favorite games of last year. I think Clive is such a great character. I think the voice acting is fantastic, and the stuff with him and his brother Joshua is so good. I love that this is the first M for mature Final Fantasy game. It really goes out there with the bad language and the violence and the gore. I love that this is the first one that just goes balls to the wall, like violent with a Final Fantasy game. I love the story. I think this has the best Cid in any Final Fantasy game. Really, I genuinely think this is the best Cid I've seen. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. The only issue I have with it is that I wish there was. I think the combat system was good. I think it could have been done a little better. And I just wish I had a little more free realm with the game. Like I wish there was more free roaming within the game. But I still enjoyed it. I thought the story was excellent. The voice acting was great. The characters, especially of Clive and Joshua and Cid, all good stuff. The villains were really good too. And I was just super satisfied when the game was over, and I really enjoyed it. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Final Fantasy 16. Number 7, Final Fantasy 14, the online. Great online game. Man, you can just spend buttloads of hundreds of hours. What Yoshi P did with Final Fantasy 14 is just excellent. Creating my own character, going to these whole worlds, collecting my own summons and weapons, and going on these amazing, immaculate journeys. Like, if you're an online, if you love JRPG, MMO, multiplayer JRPGs, man, you're gonna fucking have a blast with this game. It's so good. One of the best online fantasy games I've ever played. It shits on Warcraft. So yeah, Final Fantasy 14 all the way. All right, number 6. The game that made me want to do this list. Rebirth. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. Excellent game. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's basically finishes disc 1 of Final Fantasy 7. I'm not going to spoil it because people still haven't played it yet, but it's fantastic. The stuff that they do with Aerith and Zack, great. It brought in the characters that we've been waiting for, because the end of remake Red 13 comes, but like we get Kate Sith, we get Vincent, we get Yuffie, we get Cid. It was so great seeing these characters going to Cosmo Canyon, the Temple of Ancients, and exploring this with modern visuals is so good. The ending with Sephiroth is fantastic. I loved it. Had a blast with this game. Going on the dates with Tifa. All of it. Amazing. Loved it so much. Absolutely adored it. I don't know what else I can say without spoiling it. There's some things I wish they did a little better. I thought the remake was a little better. Because the remake changes things, but changes things in actually a way that I liked. But this one kind of stays a little more true to Final Fantasy 7, which is, I have no problem with that. There's just some things I would have changed within the story, but I loved it still. Nonetheless, I loved it. So, yeah. Number 5, top 5, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. I liked the remake a little more than Rebirth because I love that it focuses on the Avalanche, and I like that it focused more on Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge and more of their stories, and we actually got to know them, even though we know what happens to them in the end. I love that we actually got to have stories with them, which was fantastic. I love that Aerith, this is one of my favorite versions of Aerith in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I love her character so much. I love how they did, the Dancing Queen. I love how they did Cloud dressing up, going to Don Corleone's, so good. Barrett was great. Cloud was great. All Tifa and just bringing in Red 13, the stuff with Hojo. I loved it. I loved the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I had so much fun with it, and it changed things, but I didn't care. I still had a blast with it, so yeah. All right, number 4, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, a lot of Final Fantasy VIIs, but Crisis Core. I might as well just put the remastered because it's basically the same game. I love it. I love that it focused on Zack Fair. Zack Fair is one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters. He's such a great character, and I loved him and his relationship and friendship with Cloud, and with his mentor Angeal, and the shit with Genesis and Sephiroth, and his connections with Aerith, and then also with Tifa, and how it all builds up to Final Fantasy VII, which leads to the most saddest ending in any Final Fantasy with him and Cloud. Holy shit, but man, I love Crisis Core. I love it. I loved it on the PSP, and I love that they remastered it on the PS4/PS5, and it's so fucking good. One of my favorite stories about one of my favorite characters, Mr. Zack, Crisis Core. So good. Top 3. Number 3, Final Fantasy VI. This is a lot of people's favorites, and for good reason. It has one of the best Final Fantasy villains out there, and it's the first one with a female protagonist. It's the first one to bring a female protagonist with Terra. Terra, such a great character. It's the first one that has, again, a big, huge revolution within, like, the first half of the game. And it has probably one of the most sadistic villains in all of Final Fantasy. And it has such good gameplay. Holy shit, the gameplay in 6 is so damn good. And yeah, it's just such a good story. That's why people just connect with 6 so much. It's the story. The characters are great, and the villain is so good, but it's the story. And I won't spoil the story, but trust me, when you play Final Fantasy VI, you're in for a hell of a good story, and hell of a fucking ending. Holy shit, the ending is so good. But yeah, I love 6. It's one of my favorites. Top 2. Everyone knows what my top 2 is. Yeah, number 2 is Final Fantasy X. I've talked so much about Final Fantasy X. I did a whole video about sad games. 10 is the best story. Like, I just talked about 6. I think 6 and 10 have the best Final Fantasy stories. 10 has the best story. 6 is so close. 6's story is fucking amazing. 10's is the best. It's my favorite Final Fantasy story. And it has one of my, some of my favorite characters. Like, I love Titus, I love Yuna, I love Auron, I love Seymour as a villain, I love the Braska and Jekt and Auron story, I love Waka, Kimari Ronso, and Riku, and Lulu. I love these characters. I don't know, I love the story, and I love the sphere grids, and how they did the Aeons, and holy shit, just man, you go on a hell of a journey with this game, and it's just an emotional roller coaster, and it's such a good game. I play it like every couple of years, and just I can't ever get sick of it. It's just such a good game, and it's been a part of my life since I've been like 12, and it means the world to me. And every time I play it, it almost makes my number 1, and because every time I play 10. And then I beat it, and I'm like, why isn't this my favorite? It should be, because I fucking love it so much. I love it to the moon and back. I love this game. But number 1 will always be number 1. That's Final Fantasy VII. It's because when I play Final Fantasy VII, it always established that, yeah, this is the best. This is my favorite. This is the first Final Fantasy game I ever played. I played it at 11 years old. It was the first Final Fantasy game I played on the PS1. And I loved it. It blew me away with its characters and its story and its amazing gameplay. This is the game that put Final Fantasy on the map. Final Fantasy was big when it first came out, but 7 is what made it like A-list game. Like it made it like a 5-star game. Like Final Fantasy 7 brought Final Fantasy fans like all around North America. Like anytime I talk to Final Fantasy fans, a lot of them say Final Fantasy 7 was the game that made them Final Fantasy fans, and for good reason. I think it has the best gameplay. It has the most revolutionary gameplay. Every character, with the exception of Kate Sith, is amazing. It has Cloud Strife, my favorite protagonist. It has Sephiroth, my favorite Final Fantasy villain. It's brutal. It's dark. It's compelling. It's just brilliant and perfect in every way, shape, or form, and it's the best Final Fantasy game I've ever played. So that was my very long ranking of the Final Fantasy games. Sorry about that, but thank you all for watching, and give me your guys' ranking of every Final Fantasy game you've played, from your least favorite to your favorite. Comment below, let me know. And as always, for this video, please subscribe to this channel. Enjoy the dark side.